Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'd like to remind all of you that first and foremost, I'm a soccer coach. Public speaking doesn't come easy to me unless it's a halftime talk to teenagers. So if I'm a little bit nervous, well, it's because I am. I initially was going to had a prepared talk ready to give, but after lunch, I realized that it would probably be better if I just told you guys a few stories, then opened it up for questions and have a conversation. I'm not a very formal person. I have jeans on, and I prefer conversations than talking at people. So I'm going to give you a few stories, a little bit of background, and then open it up for questions. So this started 7 years ago. I was living in Atlanta, and I was on my way to Clarkston, which is about 10 minutes from where I lived, to go to a Middle Eastern grocery store. I'm originally from Jordan, and there's not many places in Atlanta where you can find authentic pita bread and hummus. So I drive to this ethnic grocery store in Clarkston. And after I picked up my groceries, I missed my turn back onto Ponce de Leon, and I had to U-turn into this apartment complex. And when I U-turned into this apartment complex, outside there were boys playing soccer. They were playing barefoot, and they had rocks set up as goals, and they were having the time of their life. And maybe I was a little bit homesick, but they reminded me of home. They reminded me of the way I played soccer in the streets of Jordan with my brothers and cousins. So I know this sounds a little creepy, but I stayed in my car and watched them for a couple of hours, and realized that I was really excited. And so I came out later in the week at the same time, but this time I was armed with a soccer ball. And the minute I stepped out of my car, the boys rushed me. They wanted the ball. And so I asked them to play in return. And they were a little hesitant about letting a woman and a stranger play, but they really wanted the ball. So they got in their little huddle, discussed amongst themselves if they were going to let me play. And eventually they looked at me, they said, okay, you can play, but you're on their team. And they gave me the little kid and the chubby one, but that was okay. We had the time of our lives. We played for a couple of hours. I played barefoot. We sweated. We argued about goals. And it reminded me of the love of the game that I had grown up playing. And at that point, I had been coaching a girls' club soccer team, more elite team. And I was beginning to hate the game because of the overbearing parents, the rules, the cost of the game, the formality of it. And I was trying to find a place where I could go back to the way I used to play it. And so the boys provided that for me. So I started making excuses up at work to go run errands at the same time every day so I could go play pickup soccer with these kids. And one thing led to another, and then I asked the kids if they wanted to start a team, because I was a coach, and they were very excited that they were going to get to play professional soccer. And I said, no, we're going to do a youth soccer team. But there were only 6 of us at the time, and that's not enough for a full team. So we got in my car, and we started driving around the community, and any kid we saw that was about the right size, we showed them the soccer ball, we told them 5 o'clock, and the other kids in the car would tell them where to go in their native language. And the first day we met up, we had 30 kids show up. And it was a little overwhelming. I can't manage 30 kids. Well, I couldn't back then manage 30 kids on my own. So I split them up into 2 teams and tried to give them the right, center, left side of the field and just tell them to scrimmage, see if we actually had any talent to form a team. And there's one kid that caught my eye. He was the smallest one out there, and he was just running all over the place. And he wouldn't hold a position. I kept trying to get his attention, but I didn't know his name. So I call over to Noor, one of the Afghan kids I know. I was like, Noor, what's his name? And he's like, oh, that's One Shoe. I'm like, One Shoe? He's like, yeah, that's One Shoe. And I look over, and this kid has this one huge black oversized sneaker on his left foot, his kicking foot, and his other foot was bare. And he was having the time of his life. And I continued to watch him play. And an hour later, I called practice, and everyone stepped off the field, and One Shoe comes over, and he takes off his shoe, wipes it off, down, and puts it in his backpack, getting ready to walk 2 miles home. And he was 8 at the time. And he looks over at me and says, see you tomorrow, coach. And I was like, see you tomorrow, One Shoe. And not to him. In my head, I didn't. He found out a couple of weeks later that that was his nickname. And I looked down at my brand new kangaroo leather cleats that I'd bought for the start of the season, and I was never more ashamed in my life for having them. And so that night, I put them away, promising myself that I wouldn't pull them out till all my kids could have what I have. And that was the first story that hooked me in to the kids. The second one was one night as I was driving some of the kids home from practice, one of the boys was in the car and he starts holding his stomach. And I'm like, what's wrong? He's like, I'm hungry. I said, well, it's okay, you're gonna be home soon. You'll be able to get something to eat at home. And he's like, no, there's nothing at home. And I think the kid's trying to con me into buying him McDonald's or Taco Bell on the way back. And I'm like, no, there's gotta be something at home. And he's like, no, coach, it's that time of the month. I'm like, what do you mean time of the month? He's like, it's that time of the month. I found out time of month meant the time the food stamps run out. So I walk into his apartment and his mom is in the corner, huddled up and rocking back and forth, saying, I work hard every day. The lights were turned off and the cupboards were bare. So I take the boy out with me and we go grocery shopping, and I come back and I sit with the mom. I was like, we need to sit and talk. You know, you're fully employed. She was employed at the Ritz-Carlton at the time, working full-time, getting paid $7.25 an hour and not getting paid any overtime for the work that she did. And she commuted 2 hours each way to get to work, and she had 3 boys under the age of 14 to take care of. And here I am, college educated and arrogant, thinking that she was spending her money on stuff she didn't need to spend it on. We sat down to make a budget, and as hard as I tried, I couldn't make the budget work. There was no way. She covered rent, some food, her utilities. She didn't even have a cell phone, and there wasn't enough to get by. And here I am thinking, well, if everyone works, then they should be able to make it in this country. And that wasn't the case. And she was limited, she was illiterate, she couldn't get any other jobs outside of that. And at that point, I had a cafe that I owned and ran in Decatur. And I realized that worrying about how much I was charging for a latte was pretty inconsequential compared to the things that the kids were dealing with. And so a few months later, after that incident, I shut down the cafe and filed for bankruptcy and started this journey that has taken me on a crazy roller coaster. The day the cafe closed, the mom that I had tried to make a budget with offered me $50 to get me through the next few months and said I could live with them until I found work. And at that point, I started a cleaning business for the moms. You know, most of them had been working at, you know, 4- or 5-star hotels. They knew how to clean. And we started off at $10, $11 an hour and then increased it to $12, $13 an hour. And the great thing about that is a few years ago, when the nonprofit started exploding, I couldn't run both. And so I gave the business away to the employees and they run it now. And so the mom that was involved very early on has, you know, her own set of 15 to 20 clients that she takes care of now. All right, that's enough stories. We're going to open it up for questions. And or not. I actually do have an incentive, though. I bought 2 T-shirts. So for questions that I haven't heard before, and I do this a lot, so I've got T-shirts in 2 different sizes about the Fugees. So can I cover that?
Oh yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Turn around. I've got a whole bunch of logos behind you too. So.
Okay. I didn't know if I could cover it. All right.
Hillary.
You've heard this before, so I don't need a T-shirt, but unless you want to give me one. But I'm curious if you could talk, because I think it's really important to talk about how you've incorporated girls into your soccer program and how that's new.
So I grew up in the Middle East, and I went to women's college, so it was always very important for me to have girls or women as part of our programming. And so I've made a lot of mistakes in the past 7 years, and this was one of them. When I started the first round of girls programming, I went in, got this grant from the Atlanta Women's Foundation, rounded up 16 girls, aged 10 to 16, and said, we're going to start a girls program. The parents were very reluctant in supporting it. Girls that joined were ones that didn't really want to participate, but I was convinced I could make it work. And I couldn't. You know, I went in saying, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. And after a season of trying to coach girls that didn't want to play, I'm an athlete, so I didn't know how to coach people that didn't want to play. I was like, all right, we're not going to do this. It'll just be a boys program from now on. And then a year and a half ago, the parents of the kids approached me, the parents of my boys who had daughters, and they're like, we want you to start a girls program. We had 5-year track record in the community. We have sent boys off to college. Our boys were graduating, not dropping out, not getting into gangs, not getting girls pregnant. So the families wanted us to do the same for the girls. And that's when it worked, not when we went in and said, this is what you need and this is how it's going to work. Does that answer it? Yeah.
Sir, do you have a question?
I was just wondering how you secured funding for your organizations.
When it started off as a pickup soccer game, and it started off purely for selfish reasons. I wanted to play a game that I loved in a way that I loved it. And then, then I started coaching the kids, and then after practice, the kids would be like, Coach, can you help us with homework? And then first I told them, like, go get your mom to help you, and then realized that their moms were illiterate. And so I started tutoring 1 to 2 kids, and then it was 2 to 15 kids. And we'd start studying at the park benches after practice or in the hallways of their apartment complexes. And most of it was funded from my own pocket in the first couple of years, and then friends were giving money, but it wasn't a nonprofit. We partnered with a few other organizations to do, soccer registration and get some equipment. But I realized very quickly that if we wanted to take it to any type of sustainable program, we would have to have our own organization. So in fall of 2006, we formed the nonprofit. First round of donations were from friends and family, and then in January of 2007, we're on the front page of the New York Times, and then the donations started coming in, and then from that time on, we've been in a lot of media. We've been on the Today Show, NPR, CNN. Our latest was on CBS Sunday Morning in late October. And so we've been very successful in getting a lot of individuals to donate to our organization. We've secured funding from the Kellogg Foundation nationally and a few other Atlanta foundations. But we operate, our organizational budget is $1 million. And we're very frugal. Like if we can get anything in kind, we do it in kind. But a lot of it is going out, speaking and fundraising. And we've had a lot of success with online fundraising. We try to target, the $10 a month donor, not the $10,000 a year donor. But if you're a $10,000 a year donor, I won't turn you away. So yeah, that's where we've been. But we're getting ready to launch a capital campaign for $5 million for the first phase, $15 million for the entire project, which is to build the first private school for refugees in the country. And thank you. Because I'm going to give you a T-shirt. Spontaneous applause will get T-shirts today. No, so yeah, I mean, our dreams are very big, and so it's always fundraising. I wish that wasn't the case, but I think that's part of the game. Yeah.
Yes.
Hold on a second, sir. Let's get a microphone to you.
What is the scope of your organization? How many communities and children and teachers and so on?
So we're just in Clarkston. We haven't franchised out. We have 86 boys in our soccer and after-school program. We have 50 elementary-age kids in an after-school program that our 7th and 8th graders run. And then we have a private school for 6th through 8th grade for 35 kids. And next year it'll be 6th through 9th for 55 kids, and 6th through 10th for 75 kids. I have 7 full-time teachers. Our classes are small. None of our classes in our school have more than 10 kids in the classroom. Every kid in the school, their parents have never graduated from high school or college, obviously not college. Does that answer or more? You want more? I don't think I have more.
What is your response? Because you've had this now a lot in the past 5 years, especially at the New York Times, of replication, of franchising.
We have been asked to replicate and do this in other communities. There's a lot of resettlement communities around the country, Des Moines, Iowa, Lincoln, Nebraska, Portland, Maine. And we'll get emails and calls from organizations there that want us to do the Fugees over there. And I was presenting to the Kellogg Foundation a couple of years ago and telling them what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. And in the presentation, I think there's about this many people in the room, and one of the directors said, well, we have about $3 million if you're willing to replicate. And I had to stop. I was like, $3 million? Because I haven't seen that since, And I was like, we can't. I said, if we replicate now, we're going to fall flat on our face. We'd rather you invest in us to get to the point where people can come and learn from us and then go do it in their own communities, but we can't go out and do it. And I left that meeting thinking Kellogg is never going to fund us ever. And they thought, what an idiot of a director that came in to tell me they don't want $3 million. And then I called a couple of my friends. I'm like, we're never getting this funding. And Kellogg called that afternoon and said, we want you to apply for a multi-year grant, $200,000 a year for 2 years. And we got it. And they're like, we've never had a director come in and say no to $3 million. and be very honest about why they couldn't do it. So I think part of growing so much as we have grown organically, but also knowing our limits, because it's very easy to get pulled in every direction and want to do everything for everyone, but we can't. And so I believe in doing what you do really well, and the rest will follow.
Thank you for being here. My name is Vina. I'm a first-year student here at the school. You mentioned a lot that the parents, particularly the mothers of the students, are illiterate. And there's been a lot of research done on the fact that literate mothers create more literacy amongst their children. So have you thought about maybe doing some sort of literacy programs for the parents? I know they're working full times and probably more than one job, so it's difficult. But have you thought about maybe expanding into a literacy program for the parents as well?
We have, and I haven't rolled it out, but they do work full time, and most of them do work double jobs, so that when would they do it? And you can't teach someone to read once a week. Like, it has to be an intensive program. And I always thought, well, take time off work, this is worth it, but you can't take time off work if you have to pay the bills. So I think some days I feel a little bit like the parents, where they're willing to sacrifice for their kids. But it's hard because, the kids go in and they're the ones that are like reading the bills for their parents, explaining the insurance, in some cases doing the taxes. And that's not a role a 14 or 15-year-old should play. But I can't do that right now. But who knows, in 3 or 4 years, if we decide that would be a way we would want to go.
You have players from all over the world, and I'm curious if there's ever any cultural clashing over the rules of soccer, how best to play and learn and strategy, beyond just like, my team's better than yours.
So luckily, because they're all from war-torn countries, they don't have national teams, because their countries don't have the infrastructure to do that. So it's never, Nepal is better than Burundi. Nepal doesn't really have a team, neither does Burundi. So they don't have that clash. The clash they have is probably on which club they support, which British Premier or Spanish League team that they love plays better. Which, is it Ronaldo or Messi? The team is pretty much split on that one, Manchester or Chelsea. When I first started the team, the kids would split among their different ethnic groups, and then amongst that ethnic group, again, like if we have kids from Afghanistan, they would click together, and then the Sunnis would be by themselves and the Shias would be by themselves. And Sudanese would all clump together, and then the North Sudanese and South Sudanese by themselves. And that's going to be a problem, because you can't win any games if your team's not getting along. And so I started intentionally mixing the groups up during drills, and then doing a lot of stuff outside of soccer, like going bowling or meeting in the park just to play for fun. And then I think after their first loss, they realized that something was going to have to change, because they weren't passing to each other. It was like all about me, me, me. And what I did was, the girls team that I'd coached, I bought them out. I told the boys, I said, you need a little bit more practice. You're going to scrimmage the girls team, and really playing into the sexism there. And they're like, you're letting us play a girls team? I said, yeah, they're your age. They've played the same amount of times you had. This should be an easy win for you. And the girls kicked their butt. They beat them 11-1. And the one was a mercy goal. Yeah. And the boys are like, but they're not better than us. And skill-wise, they weren't. The boys have incredible footwork. The things they struggle with is a throw-in and offsides, because they never played, with rules. But skill-wise, they were much better, but as a team, they weren't. And they realized that very quickly, that the girls, were doing two-touch passing and supporting each other and not yelling at each other. And, season into that, their attitude turned. And I think nothing is more humbling to men than being beaten by women. So, yeah.
You talked a little bit about the sort of cultural cohesion on the field with your players of the multiple countries, peoples there. Do you see that transfer up to the parents as well? Are parents sort of getting engaged in this?
No. The parents won't get engaged, and we've tried, but they won't. Like we do a parent day every season where we round up all the parents and bring them out so they could come watch the kids. Because for most of our games, the parents can't come because they're either working or they have 6 or 7 kids to take care of. So once a season, we round up all our volunteers and bring everyone out for like this big soccer party. And the parents that will talk to each other are the ones not from the same country. So in a way, there is that, like, you know, the Ethiopian mom talking to the Burmese mom or talking to the Liberian mom. But the ones where there is conflict in their countries, they don't really talk to each other. And my approach has always been, well, we can work on the kids. If we can change it with the kids, then maybe the next generation after that is going to be okay with it. But the family days are always fun because, you know, they only happen once a season. But a few years ago, we brought all the moms out, and they're dressed in their national dress. You know, they think it's this big major thing, not shorts and T-shirts on a Saturday. And we're playing this predominantly white team. And one of the kids scores, and his mom had never seen him score a goal or even play. And she runs onto the middle of the field and starts dancing. She's this Liberian woman, and the referee looks at me, and he's like, "You need to get her off." I'm like, "She's cheering. She's not yelling at you. She's not cussing you out. She's supporting her child." He's like, "Get her off and make sure she doesn't do this again." So I walk her off, and I tell the moms, I was like, "You can cheer. You guys can clap." Meanwhile, the parents of the other team are just watching us like we're crazy, like they've never seen anything like this before. And then the boys fed off that, and they scored within 3 minutes. And then 3 moms ran into the middle of the field, and I'm like, I'm about to get ejected from the game. But it's always fun when they put stuff like that into perspective. Like, they never yell at their kids at games, or if anything, they make fun of them, not, you know, berate them. So it's, I think it's nice when other parents get to see that, because I think youth sports is going downhill with the parent involvement.
We talk about the other team's reaction to y'all. You kind of mentioned it there, but I mean, now that it's been almost 7 years, but in the beginning, I'm sure there was some.
It's still mixed, you know. It's still. I think the United States is the only place that has managed to make soccer an affluent sport, not everyone's sport, and that's very unfortunate. But you know, like we've gone to games where people have said, you know, go back where you came from, and have used the N-word to our kids, and it's hard because I'm very protective of them, and you know, you want to lash out, but you also want to teach them how to handle this appropriately. I remember once we were, was it like 45 minutes north of Atlanta, and we show up to a game, and we show up in a bus, and you know, our equipment's in plastic bags, and then you top it off, it's headed by a female coach, not a male coach, and everybody was looking at us. And one of the kids like, "Coach, why are they looking at us?" And I was like, "Oh, it's because you have a girl for a coach." And he's like, "No, coach, that's not it." I'm like, "No, it is." And he's like, "Really? You think so?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." And then he's like, "Well, what if they knew the truth?" And I was like, "The truth? What is the truth?" And he's like, "That you're an Arab and a Muslim." I was like, "God help us if they knew that." And so I told him, I said, one day I'm going to wear a burqa to the game and see how everyone reacts to that. But I think it's having fun with it and not reacting. There was one game that got really ugly a few years ago. The N-word was being used freely. The ref wasn't stopping it or saying anything. And I, like at one point, like went up to the ref, said, "You can't do this. You know, you've got to control the game." And he's like, "Well, they're just trash talking. It happens in every sport." And at halftime, the boys came off and they were really angry. And you know, I thought if I didn't figure out how to control it, a fight was going to break out. And so I looked at him, I said, "You know, they're just trying to get in your head. If they say anything to you, just smile." I said, "That's all you do is just smile back at them. They push you down, you get up and you smile." And one of the kids, Tomas, his English was minimal, so he only understood the word smile. And so we get back on the field and we start playing, and then their coach starts yelling, and Tomas turns to him and smiles. And then the coach gets angrier and said, "Boy, what are you looking at?" And then he starts like cussing him out, and very loudly. And Tomas keeps smiling, and then the ref looks at the coach and ejects him off the field. And everyone's like, "Coach, it works," and Tomas is still smiling. But you know, it's not let people get in their heads and put them down. Like, they know who they are, you know, they should be proud of it. And I think it's use the game constantly to teach that.
Yes, sir. Bill, in front of you, right here.
So as you look out a year, 2, 5, what are your goals?
Next year is to survive. Year 2 is to almost double our enrollment in the school, is to start, perfecting the curriculum and start to share it, and, well, I think more experiment with it and then start sharing it. Year 5, in 4 years, I'll see the first class of Fugees graduate from the Fugees Academy. And I think that will be a big day. And year 10, I look to retire. So 2, 5, and 10, maybe 7 retire. Yeah.
Hillary? It's coming behind you.
You talked a little bit about breaking down the barriers within your team in terms of them segregating themselves. Do you see soccer as a potential legitimate broad-scale means for conflict resolution?
I do, because I've seen it work with our kids. Like when I first started this program and I was going around, after we'd rounded up the kids, and I was going, everyone's like, well, go talk to the other agencies, go talk to IRC and World Relief and see if they have kids they can refer you to. And everyone was like, well, why don't you just do a Liberian team or an Ethiopian team? You're not going to be able to get everybody playing together. And I'm like, it's soccer. Like, everyone's going to play together. And I think unless you've played it, you don't really understand the power of it. But I have friends that went to the Peace Corps, and when they were going, I was like, just do me a favor and take a soccer ball with you. And they did, and any village they walked into, they immediately had a group of friends because of the ball, and people would just come and start playing. And it's like, everyone asks, well, what's your universal language? Like, if most kids don't speak English or Arabic or Swahili, I was like, soccer, that's, well, football, but that's what it is. And I think there are other organizations that are doing it around the world in small groups where it's shown to work. Like there's an organization that's working with Israeli and Palestinian youth, and they're playing on the same team together. I mean, you'll never get Israelis and Palestinians to get along, but on a soccer field you can, and I think there's power to that. And if you can keep doing it with all the different groups around the world that don't agree, I mean, it sounds cheesy, but I think it will, and it does.
We have a student that's going abroad this summer who's using ultimate frisbee, and
No.
That's not going to work.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
no, I'm
so-
just kidding. Yeah, it's similar
Sorry,
to
Nathan,
soccer.
just go home.
No, I'm
Don't
just
worry
kidding.
about it.
It's better than taking American football over. So yeah, and it's similar to soccer, except your hands. Yeah.
It's just the power of sport.
Yeah, it is. And I think with any community, it's about finding what it is that can engage them, whether, I believe in sports, whether it's going to be soccer, basketball, or football, or baseball, whatever it is. But I think there's something that can engage the kids in a very powerful way. And I think educators need to look at engaging the kids, not in focusing on themselves, on what they think is interesting, because the kids need to find it interesting and powerful.
Well, Coach, thank you for squeezing in between games. She had a game last night. She has a game tomorrow. So she's out very quickly. So thank you again, and thank you all for coming out.
Thank you.